Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gretchen and today I am here with another reading recap. And if you haven't been able to tell by the sound of my voice, I am under the weather. I have been sick now for about a week and a half and I just feel like there is no end in sight with this. I will have a moment where I feel a little better and then, fast forward 3 hours and it has taken me down again. But I haven't really felt up to filming. I've barely felt up to getting out of bed, but today I just so happened to get a little bit of a burst of energy, so we'll see how this goes. And I apologize ahead of time for my voice and any, I hope I don't have a lot of coughing fits or anything like that. If I do, I will try to edit those out. But yeah, we're gonna try to get through this. It's not gonna be the best video. I'm still a little foggy, so it might not be as coherent as usual. Not that I'm always coherent, but you know what I mean. And yeah, we'll talk about the 3 books that I finished, and then I'll talk about my 1 DNF and then my active reads. Now, normally when I'm feeling under the weather, reading is a comfort for me, but for some reason I haven't even felt up to reading lately. So far this year I am way behind. I've barely read anything and I don't feel like myself in so many ways at the moment because of that. But I have managed to finish 3 books and we will talk about those. The first book that I want to talk about is a book called The Lost Bookshop. It's by Evie Woods. This is a book that was never on my radar. I actually only picked this up because I received it as a Christmas gift. I know they say not to judge a book by its cover, but this is a book that I have seen around and I've just kind of dismissed it. I figured that it would be kind of cozy and super predictable and very commercial and not something that I would typically be in the mood for. I do get in the mood periodically for things like that, but this has just never caught my eye. But when I received it as a gift, I read the synopsis of it and I was like, wow, yeah, that actually sounds interesting and I'm curious to see where it goes. And honestly, I'm glad I took a shot on this book because it was very different from what I was expecting. I was expecting saccharine sweet and sugar-coated and something that was very predictable and able to be tied up with a bow at the end, and just everything was perfect and ideal. But this book was actually not that at all. It did have its moments, but for the most part, this was a little edgier than I thought it would be based on my initial assumptions of it, and I did end up enjoying the story overall. So this is a story that follows 2 different timelines, and there are 3 different characters. We have Opaline, who is a woman living in Paris in the 1920s. She is very much oppressed. She is, they're trying to basically, her brother is trying to basically marry her off, and she doesn't want to be tied down. She wants to have her freedom. She wants to make her own life choices, and her brother is trying to dictate every aspect of her life. So we follow a timeline with her as she wanders through Paris, and she even gets a job working at Shakespeare and Company. And there's also this link to this magical bookstore that is in Dublin, and that is where we come into the current timeline, and there's 2 other characters that we meet. So we have Martha. Martha is a woman who is trying to escape a domestic abuse situation within her marriage, and she finds work working for this wealthy woman as like a housekeeper type role in her home. And then there's Henry, who is a scholar, and he is on the search for this lost manuscript and this magical or elusive lost bookstore, and his search for it brings him into contact with Martha. And the story goes on from there. As I mentioned, this does have elements of magical realism and the way that the stories unfold. Obviously, we have the interaction between Henry and Martha in present day, and then there are ways that the path of Opaline and her story intertwines with the lives of Martha and Henry. And yeah, I wouldn't say it was a favorite book, but going into this with a preconceived notion of what I thought the book was going to be, and for it to be something different and a little more edgy, a little more risky. It wasn't as cozy as I thought it was going to be. I thought, like I said, it was going to be this perfect, sweet little book, and then I actually got to the first dropping of an F-bomb, and I was like, whoa, like I was not expecting that at all. So I was pleasantly surprised by this, and yeah, I would say if you do tend to like books with magical realism, this could be something that you would enjoy. It is low stakes. I don't think that there was a whole lot of investment in this book, but it was an entertaining story overall. And yeah, I'm glad that I was gifted it and that I took a chance on it. The second book that I finished is one that I had started to talk about on my previous wrap-up video, which was The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This book ended up being a surprise for me as well. I mentioned in that last video that this book kind of snuck up on me. I had not heard about it at all, and then all of a sudden everybody was talking about it, so I did give it a chance, and I really enjoyed my time with this book. This book is epistolary, and it follows the life of a woman named Sybil. And Sybil is, she's older, and I think she's maybe in her 70s, if I'm remembering correctly. Like I said, my brain is a little foggy at the moment, but I believe she's in her 70s. She has adult children. She has been on her own for a while. Her husband, they divorced years ago, and she has been living by herself. She lives in Maryland by some water, and she spends most of her days looking out at the water and writing correspondence to all of these different people in her life. She's very much old school in the sense that she loves the written word, and she is either writing letters by hand or she is sending emails in order to communicate with people, but also to get questions answered and things like that. She's not the type of person that is going to pick up a phone. She is going to be the person that uses the written word to communicate and get her points across. And I found this book to be just so charming. She, I think I mentioned in my previous video too, reminded me very much of a less prickly Olive Kitteridge. She is a woman that has very strong opinions. She is independent, and she doesn't always sugarcoat things or know the correct thing to say, but deep down she has a really good heart, and she understands that she has made a lot of mistakes in her life. As she is getting older, she's starting to have health problems, and her health problems are starting to limit her, and she is no longer she's no longer able to do all of the things that she loves. So part of this book is learning about her dealing with that crisis of not being able to have all of that independence, and learning that you are mortal, and that our days are numbered, and how she is managing that. She also has a lot of regrets. So her career, she was a clerk for a judge, and some of those things that she was a part of as far as court cases and things go, they start to turn up in her life, and she's looking back and reflecting on a lot of those things, and some of them she's very proud of, but then there are certain things that she has been a part of that she has regrets about. She has regrets about about the relationship with her ex-husband. She has some regrets about her children and the way that their relationships currently are. So this book explores a lot of those, interpersonal dynamics that she has with all of these different people in her life. And I thought that it was so quaint. I thought it was charming, and it made me cry. It was a book that had a lot of emotions in it, and it just was a really beautiful representation of the relationships that you can have with all of the different people in your life, whether they're healthy relationships, whether they're maybe a little toxic. But I think that the delivery of this book was perfect. I loved the epistolary format. We learn about all of the different characters through these letters, and I really felt like the author did a great job of still being able to develop her characters, even though we are learning about them through these interactions, through letters and emails and things like that, which is pretty tough to do. And yeah, I thought it was a great read, and I am glad that this came on my radar and that I was able to get to it, because this will be a book that I will recommend to a lot of people, especially if you are a fan of Elizabeth Strout. Like I said, it very much feels like that Elizabeth Strout vibe to me, which, as you know, she is one of my favorite authors, and I really do enjoy the way that she not only writes her stories, but her characters. And I believe that The Correspondent is Virginia Evans' debut novel, so I hope that she comes out with more books that are in the same vein, and I will definitely pick those ones up as well. And then the last book that I was able to finish was The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Now, this is a book I was planning on reading in 2026 regardless, but I did have a little extra motivation to read it earlier in the year because it fit the reading prompt for January for Ben over at Ben Reads Good's Reading Challenge, which was to read a book that had the name of a food in its title. So this was perfect. And any excuse to pick up something from John Steinbeck is a chance that I will jump at. John Steinbeck is one of my favorite authors of all time. I fell in love with his writing in high school when I had to read Of Mice and Men, and then after I finished that, I tore through a lot of his novellas, and if you follow my channel, you'll know that I read East of Eden for the first time a few years ago, and it has since become my favorite book of all time. So I absolutely love his writing, and I was excited to get to The Grapes of Wrath because so many people have said that it's actually his superior novel, and having read East of Eden and it now being my favorite book, that put a lot of pressure on The Grapes of Wrath, and I was really expecting to be absolutely blown away. And although I did enjoy this novel very much, East of Eden is still where my heart is. Now, The Grapes of Wrath, for those of you that don't know, it follows a family during the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma, and they are really struggling. The name of the family is the Jodes, and they are struggling on their farm. Their crops aren't growing, the weather isn't cooperating, they are starving, they can barely keep a roof over their head, the banks are coming for them because they're defaulting on their loans, corporate greed is at an all-time high, and everyone is fighting for the same resources, and things are scarce and they're scary, and the family is basically just looking for a way out, and they're just about survival. They come across some handbills that are promising a much better, bountiful life in California, where they can work on farms, they can make a living wage, and they can support their family and live in a beautiful place place and have all the freedom that they want, and basically just, you know, enjoy the American dream. So they buy into this, they pack up the family, all of their belongings, and they go on that journey. And the journey follows them as they are making that decision. They're packing everything up, and then obviously en route to California. I thought that the bulk of the book would actually be about the journey, which was interesting because they got to California, I felt, much sooner than I thought that they would. But once they do get to California, things are not as they were promised. So there's still a lot of turmoil and there's still a lot of strife for them to go through once they actually get to California. So that was a misconception that I had about the book. I thought that the end would be them actually getting there, when in reality, them reaching their destination was just a whole new source of strife for them, and more horrible things for them to endure. So know that going in. The other interesting thing about this book is that I thought that it would be a solid story from start to finish about the Joad family. But what was interesting is that there are actually these little maybe call them vignettes, or like inner stories between the chapters about the Joads. So we're talking about the Joads in one chapter, and then we'll move on to a little chapter break where we're talking about the country in general, and we're kind of getting a pulse on everything that is going on for everyday Americans at that time. So it was a nice way to break up each of those stories as well, but to also get a more global view of what was happening within the country at that time, to know that yes, this story is about the Joad family, but they are not unique. Every American was struggling around that time. And it was, well, I say every American, it's that typical story where you have the haves and the have-nots. You have all of these people that are struggling, and then you have the corporations and the big greed at the top that is doing everything that they can to make more and more money to fuel their greed, and all of those workers at the lower level are just struggling to survive. And it was a very interesting read, especially with the state of this country at the moment and all of the horrible things that are going on. So it was pretty interesting just to get that, once again, another reminder of how easy it is for history to repeat itself, and how the plight of workers and migrants and people just fighting for their families to put food on the table is the same today as it was, back in the 20s and the 30s. And yeah, not that we needed another reminder of how bad things are, or how bad things could be, but yeah, it was very interesting to read that at this time. And yeah, it's like I said, compared to East of Eden, I do think that this book is a step below that for me personally, but I do think that this book was amazing, and it is definitely worth a read. The one thing that I don't think that this book did for me, which East of Eden did, was I really love Steinbeck's writing, because he is able to write a landscape, and the way that he describes things is just absolutely stunning. And The Grapes of Wrath had some of that, but I just don't think that it was at the level that East of Eden had. But yeah, I do think, like I said, it's a good book. It's solid. I'm so glad that I read it, and it wasn't what I had in mind. It was very unexpected as far as the story goes. But yeah, it was a nice surprise, and I'm gonna have to decide what my next step Steinbeck is. There are still a handful of his catalog that I have yet to read, so I'm looking forward to picking up something else from him. And yeah, I wish that I had less brain fog at the moment to talk more about what I enjoyed about this book, but maybe I'll think of things to say in future videos about the Grapes of Wrath. But glad to have finally been able to check this one off of my list. So now that I've talked about the books that I finished, I just want to touch base quickly on some of my current reads. And first, before I get into those, I do want to mention that in my last wrap up, I did talk about a current read that I have since DNF'd. I decided to put Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi down. I just wasn't vibing with that book at all. This was actually the second time that I tried to read that book, and I just don't think it's for me. I don't necessarily think that it's Helen Oyeyemi as an author. I think it was just this book in particular. So if any of you are fans of Helen Oyeyemi, please let me know of the book that is your favorite or one that you would recommend. I just don't think that Gingerbread is the one for me, but I do like weird books. I like magical realism. I like those strange types of books, but I just don't think that this was the one for me. And I think that she does a lot of those types of books. So if there is one that you think that you could recommend me, let me know, because I don't want to give up on her as an author, because I do think that there are likely books of hers that I could very much get on board with, but this one just wasn't it for me. The other book that was a carryover current read from my last video is War and Peace. I am reading the Maude translation. That is a book that I was voraciously reading. I was flying through it because I am enjoying the story so much, but when I got sick, I did put it down for a while, but I did pick it up again yesterday, and I think I read 3 chapters, so now that I'm hopefully going to be feeling better soon, I'll start to pick up the pace again with that one, because I really am enjoying that story. And then I also picked up a new book. I picked up This Here Is Love by Princess Joy L. Perry. This is one of 2 books I have left to finish for the Aspen Words Literary Prize long list. This is a book that I'm only about 50 pages in, but I'm really enjoying it so far, and hopefully by the next time I do a recap, I will have finished that one. And since we last spoke, they have also announced the long list for the Republic of Consciousness Prize for the US and Canada, and I am of course interested in most of those long listed titles. The first one I was able to get my hands on is Hothouse Bloom by Austyn Wohlers, and I have started that book. I think I'm about a third of the way in. I'm really enjoying that one so far, and I'm really looking forward to getting to a lot of those other books that made that long list and talking about those books in the future. So yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. I told you that this wouldn't be a very long or a very exciting video. I am hoping that I do start to feel better soon and my reading picks up, but yeah, that's all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until we read again, bye!